Welcome to a rather special edition of Top Lines and Tales this week. Once again, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Harbro, for their continued support. Welcome to another episode of Top Lines and Tales, and I'd like to welcome as a guest this week our regular Dr. Bob Hough. However, this week is a special for Bob, as today he was awarded the U.S. Beef Improvement Federation Pioneer Award, recognizing his lifetime contribution to the beef industry in the USA and globally, and the performance movements. Bob, congratulations and welcome.
Thank you so much. And I mean, it's always fun to be on your show first, and then also this is a special day for me. I mean, getting this award is really quite something for me, because this is the organization I've been most closely aligned with throughout my career, and it's just pretty humbling. That it's very humbling.
And it's not new, but Bob, you're a man that's been in and around the award ceremonies more times than some of the well-known actors there. But previously, you've earned the BIF Continuing Service Award, and then the BIF Ambassadors Award as well. So. I think the latter being more for journalists to educate and promote performance. But are you the second person to earn all three, Bob? Is that right?
Yeah, Dr. Bob Tabaka got it, and Dr. Bob Tabaka was a big bear of a man that was an early performance pioneer and ran the Iowa Beef Cattle Improvement Association, and he did a lot with the Certified Meat Sire program, and he wrote this wonderful book, Courageous Cattlemen, about all the early cattlemen that started the performance movement. I'd recommend anybody that can get a hold of Courageous Cattlemen get it. I mean, it's a wonderful history of the people. That's cool company.
What sort of year are you talking about that book, Bob?
Well, I think that book came out in the probably the late 70s, I think. Okay. I mean, yeah, I mean, it was fairly early. Mainly, we were talking about 50s and 60s when these people were really active in the early 70s. Gosh, and Dave Nichols and all the people we think about. Gosh, it is a cool thing.
Yeah, indeed. Well, it's a brilliant, as I said, to be only the second person to earn all three of those awards there. And Bob, let's just have a look and see how you got this far, because hats off to you for what you've done. And we're going to spend this episode just having a little bit look through your career and the people that influenced you, Bob, because I, for one, find it highly fascinating. And as I said, been a great guest on, and we've talked about everybody else. And you got the floor this week, so. Of course, you started your career pretty much at high school in the Future Farmers of America, or the FFA as it's called, isn't it? And right through to where you are now. Just to give us a bit more of your history about the FFA.
I think to put it in a global sense, I mean, you're kind of cumulatively are the people you've learned from is the knowledge you have and what you observe, and then. It's who you surround yourself with. I mean, people like you, and that's what makes you successful. and so, I mean, I've been so lucky throughout my career. It started with FFA. I had Dave Siemens was the vocational agriculture instructor, and he happened to be the first junior Charlet junior coordinator. Okay. So from down in Houston, so I had. He sent us on all these junior Charlet trips around the country. It was a wonderful opportunity. And I mean, to have somebody that come in from a national level and drop them into central Pennsylvania is kind of rare. And one last thing I grew to appreciate about him, too, is he also took on a lot of students that it was kind of their last chance to keep them in school. I didn't appreciate that at the time, but I fully appreciate that now. That I mean, he was a tough enough guy that he could take it and keep some tough people in school. So he had the ag kids and he had those kids, and he worked with both. And I've learned about that over time with reflection. So I got off to a great start.
You did. And what age does the FFA start at, Bob? You said you're still at high school. What and start and run to? Should I say? What's the age bracket?
Well, I'd say 14 up to 18 when you graduate from high school.
Okay.
So it's a 4-year deal. I mainly was active for 3 years, and it takes part of your day. And I kept pretty busy because I was trying to take the credits to go to college too, as well as fit in the vocational agriculture section of it, which was to get you ready to go farm and do those things. So I was pretty busy at school. Wasn't necessarily the greatest, but I was busy.
But does the FFA, is that only a school thing? Does that drop when you're 18? Is there a continuation of that to going older?
Well, I mean, there is a national FFA organization, and gosh, and there are some officers, so you can continue to show for a period of time with your chapter. But I got like the opportunity to go to Washington D.C. with a leadership conference, and those were the national officers, and those were college students that were unbelievably trained and motivational, and they even taught us etiquette. They taught us how to tie a tie correctly, which a lot of people needed, because I remember driving down there, and I was with a group from a different chapter. One guy thought we had to cross through a border crossing to get out of the state. He had never been out of his home county. So, I mean, it was a great experience.
Sure. And getting into the cattle business and Penn State that you mentioned just now, the State of Pennsylvania University, as its pretty full name, I suppose, and you had the opportunity then to be around some of the greats, didn't you? And we've talked about some of these before. Professor Herman Purdy, who retired, and he farmed with John Dawes that we've spoke about, and Dr. Erskine Cash as well, who took his place at Penn State and bred a lot of the famous cattle, Bob. It's some tremendous people. Were you just lucky? Were they just the right ones there, or did every university have people as good as this?
I was very, very fortunate. I had two of the best people in the country. I mean, Herman Purdy was the best, and he moved his farm when he retired very close to ours. And it was a tremendous opportunity to be around him and go down and feed and learn. And gosh, one of the things that he taught us was that you need to look. Don't go through things mechanically. And after you fed, he would quiz you what you saw. Right. And so it was a tremendous learning opportunity. And one of the proudest moments was he decided I had the eye, because he thought you were either born to be able to observe livestock or not. So he one day he said, Bobby has the eye. And so that was a proud moment. And
of course, Herman Purdy was one of the greatest cattle judges of all time. And I didn't really realize that people believe that you actually have the eye or you don't. And he honestly believed he couldn't teach that if you didn't have that, or you weren't born with that gift.
Yeah, he believed that some people just did not have the talent to see things. He could teach you what to see, and what things meant. But he believed that you were either born with the ability to observe or not, and that was a skill you came into life with or not, and you couldn't teach it.
And Bob, did some of that come through your family or through the rest of your background, or was this just something you just felt you were just lucky, just as a gift that just came to you?
I think I was just lucky. My brother, we went through like dairy judging at Penn State together. I mean, hell, he was not the best at it. I'd have an A, and he would have a much lower grade on those kinds of things. So, okay. Yeah, I mean, just in our family, there was quite a bit of difference.
And who else did you have on that? It wasn't just Herman, but you had a few there. Who else did you have on that team at Penn State?
Oh, well, I mean, Dr. Erskine Cash had taken Professor Purdy's position when he retired, and Dr. Cash came in with this fresh performance philosophy and restocked with a different kind of cattle, because we had moved into the new types as Herman had restocked. Mm-hmm. And he bred, the Power Play and Franco and Playmate and High Pockets and Sasquatch, and all these famous bulls basically were all born whenever I was there and went out. It was an exciting place to be.
I'm sure.
Dr. Casher is extremely talented.
I'm sure, but it was that you actually had, and again, that people don't understand that the universities actually had some of the top herds, and you had, one of the top herds in the country actually at the university, not just by chance, because they'd been bred there by Herman and obviously followed up by Dr. Cash.
It was such a time. I worked there one summer near the end of my college, and at the beef barns, and we clipped all the calves. I mean, there were so many regular visitors that were there, willing to pay big money that you could pay to go out and clip every calf. So that's what we did.
Did they pay you for that job, or was that students' rate?
They did. No, that was a minimum wage. Yeah, okay. The minimum wage was okay enough to get what beer I needed to drink, so it was all good.
And Cash was your judging coach, and I think he sort of got you more into giving reasons as well, which of course is another side to judging. It's not about just judging the animals in front of you; it's about being able to stand behind your reasons. And judges nowadays maybe more do that, but a lot of judges in the past they haven't had the ability to do that. They'll judge cattle and then jump in the car and drive away. And I think you have to have that ability, don't you?
Be interesting for the to watch the show and informative. I mean, the judge needs to give some reasons, and I mean, they should be able to justify the way they place the cattle, and yeah, that was part of it. And I don't have the best speaking voice or anything else, but I'm pretty good at giving reasons, and I actually placed in reasons at several major contests. I gave the highest set of reasons. Interestingly, at one contest, and they asked me to give it at the banquet, the set of reasons, and that's a little bit of a nerve-wracking thing, get up in front of a whole banquet and give us Hampshire hog reasons. And the funny thing, they had risers where they pulled them out, and they had a really small riser, and there was two sets of them stepped up where the podium was, and then there was long ones, but this one was very unsteady. To give that reasons to the banquet. During the reasons, I was rolling along, everything was fine, but I noticed my knee started shaking. And as my knee shook, the microphone started shaking a little bit. I thought, I got to get the hell out of here. And so I turned those reasons up into high gear, and I got through them fast, but it was fun, and it was quite an honor.
And on that, with giving the reasons, Bob, I just you can give good reasons and be wrong with the judge and still actually be justified, can't you, to do that? Because if you give enough accurate reasons in there that what you think, then I think that still gives you credibility, even if you don't get the placing right.
Exactly, and I'll give you an example. At the national contest, there's only 3 classes and one of the classes of rams, I placed the top 3 sheep backwards. I mean, just flat backwards. And I talked that was a reasons class, and I talked that, and I talked them correctly, and I placed 11th in sheep in the national contest, having placed 3 of the sheep backwards. So obviously describing them correctly and explaining why you did something is important, and that's something that I took when I was judging shows. I mean, you got to be confident, you be quick, be confident, and be able to explain what you did. And I was an extremely lucky person. I never had anybody jump in my pocket because I did explain what I did, and I didn't sit there and stare at it for a half hour. Some people will look at a pear forever, and they always get it wrong when they do that. You make a decision, you do it for a reason, and you explain it. You'll get along fine.
I think it was Neil Massey that said, if you're going to make a mistake, make it in a hurry, and then maybe nobody will notice. So you're right.
that was Herman's philosophy. I'll tell you what, if he was judging, you better be ready to have your cattle fed. Yeah. I mean, he was really nonchalant, but I think he had them placed as they walked in the ring. Yeah. I mean, he didn't fool around.
Sure. And let's go on. I mean, you went on. What made you decide to go on to graduate school then, Bob?
Well, that's actually a funny story. I had planned on, at first I had planned on staying home and farming with my brother, and we were milking cows, which is not the most fun thing in the world. But one day we got into a rather knockdown, drag-out fight, And my mother said, well, I think we should not do this, which is a good thing because we would have starved to death milking cows eventually. And my brother had been in the Marine Corps, and he went back in the Marine Corps, and it was very successful. And I actually thought I had a production job. But I had a guy, I would go on road trips, beer drinking periodically, and he was doing a interview for a master's at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, Massachusetts, and we were driving by UConn, University of Connecticut, and I knew the judging team members. I thought we should stop there and drink some beer. And so at the time, I also set up with that to go in and meet the department head, Dr. Cowan, who was a great guy. Turned out to be a wonderful man. And I had a production job lined up, and it fell through. And like the next day, Dr. Cowan called and said, hey, I have an assistantship here if you want it to coach the judging team. Okay. And I thought, times being what they were, that sounded pretty damn good to me. Sure. So that's where, I mean, it was really not a lot of planning involved. So I went up there and I loved it. I just absolutely loved it.
And that's the University of Connecticut that you're saying there. And yeah, tell us, what was the faculty like there?
Oh, I mean, it was a bunch of great World War II veteran types, a lot of athletes, just some true gentlemen. And the interesting thing is, they were a bunch of people that knew livestock, from draft horses to saddle horses, beef, sheep, swine. They knew all aspects of livestock. You don't see those generalists anymore. And it was also a terminal master's degree program where they trained you to do extension, to teach, and do practical things. It wasn't really set up for you to move on and get a PhD. It was set up to do extension. And so you got a wonderful practical experience there. They taught you how to teach. They taught you a lot of great things. And that was fun. And there was an interesting thing. Dr. Cowan was a bear of a man, and he was the department head, had been for like 40 years. And we had a graduate student mixer, and because it was a terminal program, graduate students turned over quickly. And so he all got us together, and he lined up all the male graduate students. This is when we were all fresh there, and he Indian wrestled us. So that's where you put your right foot, against each other's side, and then with your right hand, you move your left. With your right hand, you see who could put who on their butt. And so Dr. Cowan went about and put every one of us on our butts. I had the honor of lasting the longest. So anyway, Dr. Cowan got the pecking order straight pretty quickly on how things were going to be. But I mean, it was just a great experience. Dr. Malkus's family took me in. Great. Dr. Hale, Dr. Kinsman, Don Graham, one of the great livestock people that ever existed. Actually, they were really great. Great experience.
Brilliant. And then you went on, Bob, from New England to the deserts, I think in the southwest Arizona, to coach another judging team down there at the University of Arizona. That'd be some change in everything. I mean, I know you're in New Mexico just now and you say it's hot, but that would have been some serious time in the desert down there.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the first year we arrived in the summer, and I would cut through buildings if I was going across campus, and I wouldn't miss a water fountain. That's for sure, because it is in the middle of the desert. And then the second year we would go out and play sunstroke golf because you could get cheaper rates in the afternoon in the summer. So it didn't bother me at all. And we would go out and work cattle, and I mean it was a really wonderful experience. I didn't stay there that long. I kind of got moved back east, but while I was there in a short period, I got to work in the feedlots they had, and at some of the commercial feedlots, the exposure to that. I went up to the Apache reservation twice for roundups,
really,
and where they were collecting data. Yeah, I mean it was wonderful. I mean, cowboy coffee with the eggshells, and you throw some cold water so the grounds will go to the bottom. I mean, it was the whole thing, but it was fascinating. This was the Apache reservation. They had 6 units. We were on the best unit. It was the seed stock unit. It was about 1,000 cows and it was a cow to 100 acres. Right. So, I mean, it was big, extensive country. And that was just totally opened my eyes to what a difference and how many differences in environments. And the interesting thing is, if one of those cows went open for a year in a place where I couldn't even figure out what they lived on, they would come in so fat, it was unbelievable.
Really?
I mean, just sloppy fat. So they were that adapted to that tough an environment.
And they'd be
that,
Angus.
that if they weren't producing,
They'd be Angus cattle, I guess.
No.
Would they?
no, those were straight Herefords.
Herefords, okay, right.
I mean, the West was for many, many years straight Herefords, and eventually the Angus came in. I don't know whether they ever went. They probably have gone to Baldies just because of market forces. But yeah, it was Hereford world back.
When you say you rounded up the cattle, Bob, that'd be you on a horseback, was it?
No. I was there. There was Native American cowboys. They were doing it, and I spent most of my time at the tail end of the cattle, getting them up into the chute.
Okay.
Right.
So,
but they would bring groups in from various parts of the ranch, and they would come in about an hour, be several cowboys with a big group of cows, and then we would work them and kind of. They had this Quonset huts, but kind of camped out at night, and it was very, very interesting. And the feedlots were the same thing. Gosh, it was amazing.
Yeah, sure. And made the most of the water they'd got, and you wonder how those things work. But I mean, as you said, it's about adaptability, isn't it?
Yeah, and those cattle have to go a long way to the water. So I mean, they have to travel. And I started to understand what good foot structure was, because I mean you saw it there. They called them rock-footed cattle, and gosh, I mean there was a lot to learn, and there was also, like, we went to the Yuma feedlot. They had an experimental feedlot, and that is below sea level at the end of the Colorado River. So there's a little bit of humidity. That is one of the hottest places on earth. So you would get up it start work as soon as dawn, and then you would work for a while. Midday, literally, you go back to the motel and sleep, and then you would work into the evening as long as you could. But you had to wear leather gloves because the metal would be so hot, all the gates and everything. Yeah. I mean, it was really hot. So it was a fun experience.
Different times, and then eventually you made your way up to Virginia Tech, where you had a proper job, but I say paid by the farm, I think, and again carried on with the judging team, didn't you?
I had a teaching assistantship that was paid by the farm, and I worked for Dan Eversole, and Dan oversaw the beef herd and taught beef management, and then my advisor was Farby McCarthy, oversaw the sheep unit, and we would show some sheep and we would show some cattle, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Scientifically, gosh, there was a lot of really, really smart people there. So I actually had to become a student. I kind of just sort of bluffed my way through, but there, I had to pony up and study hard, and I'm really glad I had that experience, that I really got challenged to be a student. And one funny thing there, I went out and calved cows, so I got all that. Two quick things. I got, really some research bases that I didn't, I went on and did other things, but we worked in a hot lab, a radioactive lab. And it was, we had Randy Fry, who was doing muscle biology, but it was mainly a muscle biology lab. And he was teaching radioactive carbon safety to a co-ed who they had hired to wash test tubes. And, he was on a stool and eventually fell backwards in the stool and splashed the radioactive carbon all over his face. So then Farby McCarthy comes in, and we're all sitting there with Geiger counters, seeing how radioactive Randy Fry is. And so the joke is when someday archaeologists are going to dig up Randy Fry and they'll carbon date him, and he won't have been born yet because he's the radioactive carbon. But it was a great experience there, and then the other great experience about Virginia that made such a difference in my life. There's so many good things came together for me. Is I had sold out at the end of my when I went to grad school, the remainder of my cows to Herman Purdy and John Dawes, and they bred them up right and resold them, a lot of them, into Virginia.
Okay.
And this was a few years down the road, but now that I started going around with the judging team, and I started seeing all my old cows in their donor pens.
Still got them.
And they bought it from Herman, so they were obviously great cows. And they were cows. They were good cows. But anyway, all of a sudden I was a polled Hereford genius because they had spent a lot of money on my cows. So me fire selling my cows to Herman was one of the great things I ever did. And then I started judging polled Hereford shows all over the country in Canada. It was a wonderful happenstance.
But you did eventually get your PhD. Obviously, you got your PhD, Bob, because you are Dr. Bob. And where did you go to get that one?
Well, that was at Virginia Tech.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a great. And, they had some other great faculty like Dr. Gary Minish and Ike Eller, and I mean they had a great bunch of faculty there. It was a wonderful opportunity for me.
Sure, and then from there you went up to Maine, I think, of all places, and that's not really considered the center of the cattle industry in the U.S. Well, what drew you up there?
Well, I always make the joke that I wanted to be in the Foreign Service, but I was afraid to leave the country because it is as far east and north as you can get. I mean, Maine lasts east and north of the United States, and so it's way up there. Yeah. But my wife's family is from there, and she summered up there every summer, and so it was. I actually got hired. He wasn't too thrilled about it, but I got hired by my wife's uncle, Uncle Lou. And so he hired me cheap anyway. And Nancy's grandfather was also a potato specialist up there. And they had a family member in extension since the 1930s. And so I was kind of going into the family business. But yeah, it was not densely stocked with livestock. No. But I mean, I got the opportunity to be involved with everything. But one quick story, Uncle Lou got there, and normally the way universities have been going, it was all about publications and everything and research. And I got there, and Uncle Lou said, "There's a car out in the parking lot. I've leased it for you. I want you in that car out working with producers, and I don't want you sitting in your office writing silly publications no one's ever going to read." And I thought, this is going to be fun. I mean, this is going to be a blast. So, I mean, it couldn't have been a more wonderful opportunity. And I had to be involved in all aspects of livestock. I mean, every health, everything, and there was nowhere to hide. You had to handle everything.
And you would work with the Canadians as well. I guess you're up near the border there, aren't you?
Yeah, we are surrounded by Canada basically, and our agriculture was much more similar to New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, and in a sense Prince Edward Island. So we tended to do a lot of programming with New Brunswick, and had Bob Colpitz and Guy LeBlanc. It was a wonderful group of people there, and we had a great team, believe it or not, in Maine. I mean, different sets of skills. I always believe you had to get a team if you were going to get anything done. And there were some people in the Department of Ag. There was people, county agents, SCS. I mean, I just gathered up all these people with diverse talents and some great producers, and gosh, we got a lot done. Yeah. We set up feeder calf sales and feedlot industry and how to feed different cattle, and I mean it was we set up. We were moving about 1,000 head through our feeder calf sales. It was pretty good.
And you would get some of these big name people to come up and actually speak on the programs and judge the shows while you were there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing if you just ask who will come up, and like Dr. Harlan Ritchie and Glenn Klippenstein, and I mean, just all the big names. Jim Gibb, who is a great person that people in the UK might not know, but they should know. He's one of the great ones. But yeah, I mean, I had the best night. I had a system. Is what I did is in the morning, you hit them with all the really hard science stuff, and then you go into application after lunch, and farmers, producers that show how this stuff is implemented. And then you have a motivational speaker at the end, and then we would take the topics from our conference in December, and that would be what we would program for the year. So we
Okay.
bring in these big guns. They would get them excited. You get a Glenn Klippenstein at the end of the program to wind them up, to go out and chew nails, and we got some stuff done. It was fun,
Brilliant.
and you spend all winter running around the state giving programs. It was great.
Sure. And you judged a lot of shows during that period when you were there. But in total, Bob, I mean, again, one of the reasons maybe you've got this award is you've judged. Well, you tell me where you've judged. You've judged in a lot of places anyway, and yeah, some of the big shows, haven't you?
I have. I mean, I've judged, in Canada, Toronto, and Montreal, and Moncton had a big show one time. Then I've judged Louisville and Houston, and various one of the standard performance shows. But actually, if there's anything in the judging, I think is I try to make it more. I've always been a proponent of trying to make it a bit more objective, and that does fit in with Beef Improvement Federation to use the data in the show ring. Why guess on things that are measured? And that's essentially what you're doing, is an educated guess. Mm-hmm. And I was involved with the National 4-H judging contest for 24 years. Nice. And we moved where every breeding class had a scenario where they would, how the animals were going to be used, what the environment they were going to be kept in, and how they were going to be marketed and managed, and what their use was. And so they would actually have real life scenarios in which to rank those cattle and then give reasons on them. So it was a great learning opportunity. I thought we were way ahead of the curve. I was just always trying to get breeds to do that, but I never could.
Well, you judged in Brazil and Paraguay and sort of South America eventually, but a great experience that you had. But you eventually did wind down as a judge, didn't you, Bob?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was a great experience. I mean, my wife and I went on some great vacations through judging, and that included South America. Great opportunities to go down there, and boy, they take it seriously. I mean, it is deadly serious in South America, and but I'll tell you, I finally. I judged a lot of polled heifers for the reasons said earlier, and I got to where I was judging, and I thought, I was judging some really nice broody cattle that I thought would make some good cows, and then I would look out and I get the bloodlines at the end, and they weren't the kind of cattle that were going to make, that could give a thimble full of milk, and I just thought, what am I doing here? What am I accomplishing? And I think I was accomplishing things at like that 4-H contest, but in the show ring, I just tell you, I really wasn't accomplishing that much, and I thought maybe I should go a different direction.
Okay, so that's you. Well, you stayed involved with the judging contest, didn't you, Bob? You still are, I think.
Well, I've wound that down, but I mean, I've been involved in judging contests in Houston and the National Intercollegiate Contest. I was superintendent of the Eastern States Contest. I've listened to reasons in any number of state contests. So, yeah, I mean, I love working with the youth and all the things you learn. And then when you add in this layer of the scenarios, I just think it's a great real life way things are. You have to justify, you have to make decisions, and you have to make decisions off some real life information. And I just think that's great. Anytime you can work with young people, sometimes occasionally somebody will come back and they'll tell you what an impact that you've had on their life, and you'll, holy heck, I didn't know that. Yeah. I mean, it's really, really humbling.
Certainly heard a couple of names that you mentioned when we had Glenn Klippenstein on the program saying exactly the same thing. It's that's the things that give you the greatest pleasures when people come back and say that you've impacted their entire life. And Bob, we'll just move on with your own life. And you eventually got the itch, I think, to go out of education and go back into production agriculture, didn't you? And give it a go, a bit of crossroads for you, maybe.
Gosh, I was around so much. I mean, we were doing cool stuff in the extension. I mean, coming up with all kinds of rations and doing stuff. But gosh, I wanted to get back and do it myself, actually get part of it. And it was, and so there was a guy that was near that had what I thought was the best Angus cow herd that ever existed. I really did. It was Harmony Hill Farms.
Okay.
Just a beautiful set of cows. And I fell in love with those cows. And so I went to work down there. And of course, it didn't work out quite as I had hoped. We were calving a huge number of first calf heifers because we were going to grow that herd considerably. But when I was in the heart of calving, the high temperature for the time was 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And most of the time, it was on top of a mountain where the wind was always blowing. And most of the time, it was minus, negative numbers, which is, that is a lot colder than centigrade. Sure. And the wind was blowing. He liked to keep the barn clean, so he didn't want me to put cattle in there unless, there was feed hanging out. Right. So, keeping cattle alive. But we had 7 days where the lights went out. There was no power. And then eventually we were going to have a partnership, except that there was no working together. I just did it all. So I was working day and night. And then eventually we had I had a damn windbreak blow over on top of me. You had to keep the cattle, which on top of that windy mountain, one got loose. And stupid enough, I tried to shore it up when the wind was blowing. So that blew over on me, and that ended the production agriculture thing. Because
what size of windbreak? We're not talking to something you just put on the beach to keep the wind off. What size of windbreak we talking here, Bob? Because it did you a bit of damage, didn't it?
It's 10 foot rough cut lumber porosity fence, and so it's pretty substantial, and that it'll put a hurt on you. And then the funny thing was then I hit a damn moose on the interstate. I hadn't been out at all, and then all of a sudden I decided to go out one and judge this little tiny 4-H show right before I got my back operation. And driving home, I was going 70 miles an hour on the interstate, and boom, there's a moose standing there in the interstate. And I took that thing in the windshield, although I have a little blank spot because I don't actually remember when I hit the moose. But anyway, he came in, and I was a little bleeding, and had a little. Luckily, what saved me is I was reclined as far back as you could get because of my back injury. Otherwise, it would have just decapitated.
Through the window.
Yeah, it did. It came right in. They're so tall, their eyes don't glare, and they're so tall the body is way up, and also I had low beams on. So I didn't see that thing till I was ready to take them into the windshield. So anyway, a nurse put me in her lap, and she kept pressure on my face, and I went to some little hospital, and the guy said, "I'm going to find you somebody better to sew you up," and he goes on the phone and calling. Finally, somebody came in, and he sewed on me for a very, very, very long time, and also an eye guy. But anyway, this guy, he said, "I got to get those stitches out in 2 weeks to keep the scarring down." And it turned out to be a dang dentist, a oral surgeon. So I sat in a dentist chair getting the stitches out. But he did a wonderful job. I have a adopted sister who is a plastic surgeon. Said, "Oh, I couldn't have done a better job." But he had already lined somebody up to work on me. So anyway, what came out of that is I got the Red Angus. I needed a job. And the other thing is I said, either I'm the center of the universe or something bigger than me is the center of the universe. Right now, me being the center of the universe is not working out so well. So I think I'll believe in something bigger than myself. Okay. And so that was an important realization in my life. That there is a bigger thing, there's a bigger purpose, there's a higher power, and that's important to realize in your life. And I got the Red Angus, and that was a great thing, especially them hiring somebody from the east. It was a Western breed. 23% of the cattle were in Montana, right, where we were going to go. So I was very fortunate to get hired, and a lot of that had to do with I had some great team members in Maine who came through with me as references, as well as people like Glenn Klippenstein, Fred Williams, other people that I knew that were on the national scale, and I just called them up and said, "Hey, I need a job, and could you serve as a reference?" And they really came through for me. It was a great thing.
And we don't have a great deal or as many Sydney Red Angus on this side of the pond there, but the Red Angus back then would be maybe a smaller breed than it is now. But there were a lot of big breeders had a few of them, didn't they?
Well, it was a very, very interesting breed. It was Western. It was very much a Western oriented breed. Actually, it was very regional within the West. And they also had very large breeders. A lot of breeders with 1,000 cows, and they tended to be eccentric because they were a performance breed, and so the performance that's what it was founded on. Not actually against the show ring. It was founded on commercial and objectively describing cattle. So when these breeders got in, that was the opposite of the common way of doing things. So they were big, they were smart, and they were eccentric, and they sold a lot of bulls. And so what a wonderful opportunity to go in and learn from a bunch of bright people. And they wanted to do things. I mean, they would go against the grain. They didn't bother them a bit. It was a wonderful place to be.
And the Red Angus thing it's almost a contradiction in terms, really, especially now, Bob, where in the US everybody gets paid for a premium for cattle that are black, whether they're Angus or not, as long as they've got a wee bit of Angus in them. So a Red Angus doesn't get that. It's going the wrong direction, really.
That's true. And one of the things that I was initially hired to be a marketing coordinator to get the get the good red cattle selling with good black cattle because of the discount. And they are getting back to being discounted again. But we did a number of programs, and one of those was we got a USDA process verified program where cattle could enter into approved Angus product lines. And so we got that done with my friend Fred Williams, who at USDA, who was one of my references, and other people at USDA were great. Lee Leachman was the president at the time, and I badgered Cisco until I got a meeting with them. They're our largest food service company, and we started supplying them. So we got into the Angus game, and we had an outlet for the cattle, and we did some of the initial value-based marketing, so people get paid on true value. So we kind of cracked that nut. Now they're back in the same situation where they have to do some of the same things we did then. But it was something we were starting behind, and we had to get going.
To summarize that, I suppose, as you say, discounted cattle is that the packing houses could buy your red cattle without paying the black premium on them, and getting good cattle for less money. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, and the thing with Red Angus is it's really not what you said is exactly right. But Red Angus was a philosophy, because why have two breeds? It's like Horn and Polled Hereford. I know that's something you need to have over there, but I mean, why have red and black? And the reason there was red cattle is it was based off of a philosophy. And they used the throwaway cattle, what was thought to be genetic defects by the American Angus Association, to express this philosophy of performance and objectively describing cattle in that way of selection and having a commercially oriented breed. And, the fascinating thing is we took a philosophy that we were going to have the best objectively described cattle, and we were going to do it with the fewest traits possible in terms of genetic predictions. We took a philosophy that what the breed was Angus, so it should be the maternal common denominator in progressive commercial producers crossbreeding systems, and we took the philosophy that our business was selling bulls and our customer was a commercial producer, and that our role was to make our members profitable. So we put all our efforts into that, what I just told you, all our efforts, and we spent no money on recruiting new membership. And just naming your customer at the time as a commercial producer was actually something revolutionary, which is weird sounding. You'd think that would be self-evident, but at that time it was revolutionary to determine that. And so we we spent all our money trying to make our members profitable on selling bulls into a commercial or commercial heifers, and with no money on recruiting new members. And we grew faster than anybody else who the whole purpose was to gain new members, which was really kind of fascinating. We grew from 11th to 4th and putting zero effort into it. Really. And so I think that was one of the interesting things. And I mean, it's just goes to show people are attracted to success. And I'm not saying it was because of me. Gosh, there were so many great people around there, and talented breeders and great staff, and I mean it was a team effort.
Some of the people that we've discussed on this podcast, in the way Harlan Ritchie and Glenn Kipperstein and Douglas Dave Nichols and whatever, you call on some of those guys would be your pals by that time, and you did call on them to come in and speak and certainly give you some advice at a time where things were changing as well, but there'd be a lot of different things going on in the whole industry, let alone just in the Red Angus.
Absolutely. Things were, as we got through the frame race, things were moving more objective. Those are the best minds in the country, and that's who I wanted to seek, and that's who I wanted people to be exposed to. And I did the same thing hiring. My goal when hiring people is first get people that are good at stuff I'm not good at, and if I can hire people smarter than me, even better. And you start to surround yourself with people that are talented, have different skills, and are really smart. And gosh, you can get phenomenal amount done. And it's so exciting when that happens.
And would you have pioneered some of those things? The new EPDs were coming in, and the total herd reporting, reproductive sire summaries. A lot of those things there that you were doing there would be at the beginning for all the breeds, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, basically all of it. I mean, like total herd reporting, that went through. There were several fathers of parents of total herd reporting. It was an idea of Melvin Leland's. Jim Leachman came up with the idea of the inventory-based system, and then I came up with the reporting calendar on how you implemented it. And gosh, that you had a producer then had to account for the production of every cow every year and the performance of every calf raised through weaning on every calf, or we inactivated the cow. I mean, it was a pretty tough performance program, but that gave us unbiased genetic predictions because we had the entire weaning contemporary group, and then we could adjust for selection after that because we had the whole contemporary group. And then with the whole contemporary group, we could also assume normal biological distribution of the data so we could get rid of stuff that let's say showed non-biological properties. It was made up, whatever it was. You wouldn't see it in nature, and you can tell it pretty easily. In easy statistics, you can just dump it. And then we were going to we wanted to do the fewest EPDs to describe reproduction, maintenance, growth, and carcass. And we worked with Colorado State, had some great minds there, Bruce Golden being the primary one. And they came up with the idea of economically relevant traits, what actually pays you dollars rather than what is an indicator of that. And so that's how we judged whether to have an EPD was the economically relevant trait. So we got that done. We described those 4 areas. That was the first female reproductive sire summary. I mean, it was exciting times. And what we had going for us is we were all ignorant on what could and couldn't do at a breed association. That was our strength. I think we didn't know what we couldn't do.
I know we've got Top Gun back at the cinemas there, but I think a bit of Maverick went on with sounds like it, Bob. And you got into the financial side of it as well, and I think you kind of kick ass on that one as well, didn't you?
Well, actually, that was a funny thing. I was an exec before me, and after a couple of years, he came up. He was $180,000 in a hole, and we only had about $1 million budget at that time. And so he got moved on, and I got moved up. And I was never so lost in my life. I mean, I knew nothing, and I just finally. I got down and I started looking at the ledgers and working it up into line items. I had to go to basics because I was so lost. I mean, I went in knowing nothing, and then I would get the staff together every month, and we together so we could figure it out. And at the end of the year, by golly, we got it balanced in 1 year, and which is that was a miracle, but we did. Everybody pitched in and worked together, and we economized where we could, but we had all the paper clips we needed, and we got the things done we needed to get done, and it was just a matter of working through it. But all of a sudden, they thought I was some whiz at finances, and here I had started out probably the most ignorant person on earth on finances. So it was interesting. I got that reputation, but I always was kind of cheap, and I liked a balanced budget without a doubt. And it was, that was an important part of it, but I always thought it was kind of comical that I do have that reputation because, I started out pretty tough. Let's put it that way.
And we all know within the breed societies, certainly in the UK, the breed societies are very very traditional and hang on to their own breeds. And it is, we see a turnover of chief executives in the breed societies in the UK. I'm sure it's probably the same in the States. I think I won't mention names, but 2 or 3 of the jobs are still up for grabs just now, and 1 or 2 has turned 2 or 3 over in a couple of years. And Bob, you did 13 years. I think you won a long service medal for being the longest servicing chief executive probably in the world at 13 years, or certainly close to it anyway.
Well, there's certainly a lot, there's some that go 20, but I was the longest serving exec in the history of the Red Angus Association. So, yeah, it's generally a position that if you're going to do things, you're going to make changes, you have a time clock on you, because every change you make is not necessarily in the best interest of somebody else. Somebody else has a vested interest in the status quo. And I'll give you one example, like the show ring. When I got there, they were not managing the shows at all. And the first show was a national show in Iowa, and it was required that the judges use EBVs. And that judge wouldn't pick up the EBVs. The second show of the year, that was a regional show, they had picked a birth weight 10. I didn't know in Red Angus you could get. I had never seen one above like a 3 or 4 birth weight. So it picked it up. And then the next one, the judge was under indictment for selling clenbuterol, which is a steroidal muscle builder, to 4-H kids. Soup up their steers, and he went to jail. So I said, I got to the next board meeting. I said, "Hey, we got to get our names off these suckers, and we got to get a national show, and we got to run it, and we got to do it right." Sure. And so essentially, we had a national judging show committee of me, and I just decided what to do, but we got it in line with Red Angus, and I'm very proud. The cattle that were winning in the shows were being used by the general population. But that kind of heavy-handedness, eventually people will get bored with, But it worked. It is hard to correlate.
It is hard to correlate the two, is all we know, Bob. But as you said, if you can get the animals in the show ring that'll breed, that's all. That's utopia for everybody, isn't it? So it's the right direction to go in.
I'm proud of it. I'm really proud of it.
And then you wound that down, I said, after your 13 years. And Bob, you similar to myself, you suddenly started writing. And hey, what did they say? There's one book in everybody, and I know they said there was one book in me, and I haven't stopped writing them yet. And I think you've probably written more than I have, Bob. But you got deeply involved in the history side of it, didn't you? And tell us a bit more about how you got into the writing side of it.
Well, John Doss, who was partnered with Herman Purdy, was doing a second edition of Breeds of Cattle, that classic coffee table book. And that really needed updated because it was done during the frame race. So it was greatly expanded and went up to 45 breeds and had to have all new pictures and new descriptions when the descriptions of ideal animals had to change. So there was quite a bit of rewriting to do it. So that got me into it. And I'll tell you, I think Harlan Ritchie was the best futurist I ever knew. And one time I asked him, why those Bates cattle in 1873 sold for dang much money, because that just didn't make any sense. And he said, well, they had terrible reproduction and there was a fat on them. And so that's why they sold for so much money. And I'm going, how does the best futurist in our industry know about Bates cattle in the mid 1800s down to the detail? And I said, and that really left an impression on me that somebody they were connected. You needed to have that timeline up through to be a futurist. You don't make the same mistakes as the past. Sure. I mean, hell, I was doing a master's degree on grazing brassicas, which is basically terms which you guys were doing in the 1700s. So, I mean, we don't need to repeat the same stuff all the time. So it's part of it. You don't live there, but it helps inform you to get to the future.
But so in doing the writing, of course, you took another U-turn and went to work for the Livestock Association. And I suppose apart from being the same colour as the Red Angus, it's a pretty different breed to the Angus philosophically as well, didn't it? How do things go there?
Well, I was fairly short-lived there. They wanted what I had done at Red Angus, and basically they were more of a show breed and those kinds of things, and they really wanted to take it into a performance breed, more of a commercial based breed. And I went in there pretty hard to do that because I knew if I was going to make those changes, I had a limited time to make them, because people were not going to, that would not be in the best interest of some people. When I got there, I realized they hadn't had a balanced budget in 17 years. And so we balanced the budget. We got a strategic plan. I restaffed, and we changed the direction of that ship. But that was not in the best interest of a lot of people. And I also pointed out some problems with the cattle that need to be corrected, as well as the great things about the cattle, because they do have some great things. And all that added up to a pretty short tenure for me, and that was fun. I learned what a real breed association was like. Red Angus was some kind of weird utopian place. I'll have to I was at a real breed association.
I'll bite my political lip here because we have sort of there has been similar things, some similarities that you said in the Limousin there with maybe what's gone in the UK. And then, Bob, you did retire and you took up writing, as you said, and your expanded interest in history and learning from what people have done in the past. And was there one person along the line that really, really sparked your interest in the history?
Well, I mean, I again, two people, Harlan. And that story I told you about the Bates cattle was so important, and also Herman Purdy. I mean, I remember asking him questions. Why did the belt buckle issue error occur? And he goes, well, the tallow was worth X amount during World War II, and that got things started. Then it just sort of got carried away. But I mean, he went through the explanation of what happened, and so there was a flow to things, and things started to make sense. Yeah. And when you get those bright minds that are futurists but can explain how you got there, gosh, that excites me. Gosh, that gets me fired up. Sure. Wants me to learn.
Sure. And great names that you mentioned about there, and of course a lot of these great names are honoured in somewhere called the Saddle and Sirloin Club, where their portraits are hung on the wall, and a lot of our listeners will know about that and will heard about. There's some great names in there, and you've been involved in that by nominating quite a few of or writing the nominations for these people. And what's that entailed? And you've done a bit of research on a lot of people, I guess.
Well, I've worked with 5 nomination packets, and I mean, you have to write their whole biography. It's a huge job, but gosh, you learn so much because you're taking heroes and then you're writing their biography, and you get letters of recommendations in. You need at least 100 letters of recommendation. You have to put the resume together and the impact they've had, and I mean, it's a big job, but I thought that was a volunteer area I could work in. And gosh, I bet you I put at least 7, maybe 8 months into those, time into that. I mean, it's a job, but gosh, I've learned so much from these people. I came out well in the deal. I mean, it was really good. It's nothing I ever got paid for. I didn't want to be paid for it. I wanted to do it as a service, as an honor to my heroes, and to learn. And it's been really fun.
And then, of course, you became the go-to person for writing breed histories, and well, between us, we've both been involved in a few of these things and cross-work together. But some great people like Bert Moore and such like have helped you on those jobs.
Again, it's about the people you surrounded yourself with. I mean, you've given me some wonderful things on Scottish stuff that I needed to know as other people. Working with a Bert Moore or a John Dawes, I had some great people when I did the Simmental things, because I want somebody to give me some ideas on research, and I always get a couple proofreaders that are very talented. And, I mean, again, you surround yourself with great people and you learn so much. It's so much fun. Yeah. And I've been really lucky that I've gotten the opportunity to write breed histories as they've actually occurred, and not just a advertisement.
Sure.
And that's a real important thing, that given that license to do that.
Of course,
and that's what's made it fun.
And another thing, of course, you've amassed a lot of historic images as well, which I think is a passion of yours. I don't know how many you've got stored away there, Bob, but there must be a bit of value amongst this.
I have a couple collections. One, I have a collection with somebody else that's 229 gigabytes. My primary collection has 12,000 images in it, and I started getting that from these great people like Harlan Ritchie and Dave Hawkins and various Herman Purdy, Professor Purdy's collection. And as people started to age, I would get their collections so they didn't get lost to time. Sure. Because that's what happens to them. Yeah. And then I would also dig for images for books or other projects or articles, and all of a sudden I got 12,000 images. And so I'm actually moving this on to another entity, and we're working on in the future, and that there was a home for collections.
Mm-hmm. And possibly you and I might do something together in the future, but we'll watch that space on that one, Bob. You do one other thing that you do is that you run a popular Friday history lesson on Facebook, doesn't it? And that a bit like myself with the podcast, we love doing it, but it takes a bit of time, doesn't it?
I think it takes a bit of time. I'll tell you what, a lot of that is sometimes finding an image that you have, like 5 images that say what you want to have, but you're missing one. And you got to find that image. But other than that, a lot of it's in my head. Yeah. And I have those 12,000 images, but it's always finding that one image that you got to have to complete the story. But yeah, it's fun, and it's so nice to you get great comments as I know you do on your podcast. I've learned a lot from your podcast on Bakewell and all these ones on South Downs. And gosh, it's been fun. It's been fun being part of it, and I really appreciate it that you've allowed me to be part of it.
Well, Bob, it's been absolutely fun to honour yourself this week, because, as I said, you've been my guest now for probably the best part of a year, and on and off, and we've learned a lot of things about the States, things that I didn't know. And for you to get this great honour is a fantastic achievement, to get your recognition there. And is there anybody there that you would actually say that was? What would you say?
Well, I'll tell you, I just entered a company of some names of some people I'm pretty proud of.
Yeah. Yeah.
The most important thing I've learned is that it's that you have to learn. Mm-hmm. It's who you surround yourself with, who you absorb information with. If you surround yourself with people with not much knowledge and not much skill, that's where you're going to end up. If you surround yourself with people with talent and knowledge, and you pay attention and you learn, you're going to have a great career and a great life. People like you, it just makes it fun. And so that, I think that's what it's about. It's always learning. and always being around great people and a great team. And that makes the world go around.
Well, Bob, you're right. It has got to be fun, and I'd like to think, I hope that our podcasts are fun to a lot of our listeners, and as you said, we get a few nice comments, and we enjoy doing that, but I think that no more fun than the fun that you and I have had, not only over the last year, but particularly today, hearing about who is this Dr. Bob Hough, and now we realise that you've earned your spurs there, and it's great to see that you've been recognised for that, Bob. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It's so nice for you to have me on.
Mm-hmm. No, well, you've always been a pleasure, and I think we've got a couple of other people in the US to speak to over the next week or two as well, which I'm looking forward to as well, Bob. So we won't be long before we get to hear your voice again.
All right. Well, you take care. Thanks so much.
Bob, thank you.
All right. Bye then.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Top Lines and Tales. Once again, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Harborough, and I hope that many of you visited the Scotch Sheep event this week and got to chat along with Harborough on their trade stand. And of course, you can always find them on the internet on their website or social media pages. So thanks to Harborough. And don't forget to tune into our Facebook group to find information about this episode and photographs and some fantastic old photographs that are being regularly presented by a chap called John Burrell. So thank you, John, for your contributions to our Facebook website, and to everybody for listening. Hope you all have a great Jubilee celebrations today.